The radical, fundamental principles of freedom, rational self-interest, and individual rights. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
All right, everybody, welcome to Yaron Brook Show on this Tuesday night, 2 nights in a row. All right. Hope everybody's having a great week. We have a ton to talk about today. We will start with NATO and the situation in Ukraine and Putin, and then we'll basically go to some economic policy, baby formula crisis, inflation, the Democrats' attempts to pretend that inflation is caused by, I don't know, rich people? Yeah, I think rich people. And Jeff Bezos' response to Joe Biden's attempt to misinform the American public about the inflation situation. So a lot to cover. It should be fun. Hopefully you guys are all... those of you listening live, if some of you who have Twitter accounts, go to Twitter and just put up there that you're listening live to this show right now. You can use the share button on here to go to Twitter directly. That'll increase the number of people watching. We have two sponsors for the show today. One is ExpressVPN, expressvpn.com/Yaron. If you go to that link, you get 3 extra months free of ExpressVPN. ExpressVPN is the VPN I actually do use. It's on all of my computers, particularly when I'm traveling on my laptop, on my iPad. It's a way to get around some of the snoopiness of some of these countries. It's a way to get YouTube in China and to get Facebook in China. It's also a way to link up to your favorite streaming channels when you're traveling in Europe and things like that if you put on a US VPN. But most importantly, it allows for security. It allows you to browse securely for your banks and things like that where you don't want to be followed. So expressvpn.com/Yaron, you get an extra 3 months when you sign up for free. Our second sponsor is fountainheadcasts.com. Fountainheadcast.com. They sell casts of classical sculptures. Beautiful, beautiful sculptures, really exceptional reproductions. It's a great way, not very expensive. It's a great way to buy something that hopefully you love and to start building up a little bit of an aesthetic collection around the house, make your house beautiful, make your house reflecting of your values through the art. So go to www.fountainheadcasts.com. I think there's a kind of Yaron Brook Show discount. I can't remember. But anyway, go say you heard about it on the show. I'm sure you'll get something. All right. But yes, you know how much I love aesthetics. You know how many artworks I have around the house. Go get yourself a beautiful sculpture from fountainheadcasts.com. I am interested in other sponsors. If anybody would like to sponsor through product placement, let me know. That would be great. So looking for different ways to monetize the Yaron Brook Show, make doodles and doodles of money. All right, Michael will start us off with the super chat. Thank you, Michael. You all know you can support the show by using the super chat to ask questions. Yesterday, we had like 50,000 questions. It was unbelievable. We made it to $750, I think, really without anybody stepping in with a huge, huge contribution because there were just so many questions. It was great. So it's a great way to support the show and ask a question and participate in what I'm going to talk about, right? I'm going to talk about your questions. So if there's a topic you want me to talk about, you don't have to sponsor a show for $1,000. You can actually just ask a question and get me talking about that topic. So there it is. Please use the super chat feature for that. Of course, you can use the super chat feature. Just to support what we do here at the Yaron Brook Show and to show value for value as a trader should. Of course, those of you who are not live can support the show on yaronbrookshow.com/support, Patreon, and subscribe stuff. All right, let's jump in. So I want to talk about this yesterday, but yesterday we got caught up in the replacement theory, and then with all your questions, there was no time to cover all the topics I had planned, so we're going to make up for it today. Let's start with a quick discussion of Putin's losing war. I told you this the day the war started. I emphasized this in the days following. The more time passes, the more right I was. This invasion of Ukraine has been a massive failure for Russia. It's been an embarrassment for its military. It's been an embarrassment for Putin. I'm not sure he knows how embarrassing it is because I'm not sure he's getting accurate information about what is actually going on the front. The war was supposed to be won quickly. Kiev was supposed to fall within 3 days. A new government was supposed to be installed in Moscow. None of that, of course, happened. And the Russian forces had to retreat from the Kiev area in humiliation after taking significant losses. Significant losses. I still haven't implemented this new software that picks up all the super chats. I'm still copying and pasting, but we will. I've got it. My programmer, the guy who did this for me, says it works. I will play around with it tomorrow. Things have just been crazy around here, and I've not gotten to it, but I will get to it tomorrow for the next show. So Putin had to withdraw from Kiev in humiliation. Putin is now, the Russian forces have now retreated from Kharkiv, another major Ukrainian city they were trying to take. And basically the Ukrainians have pushed them back to the Russian border. Russia is still trying to push to try to take the Donbass region. It has obviously had a success in Mariupol in turning the city into dust, basically. And by doing so, occupying the entire city and destroying everything about it. And today, I think it was today, maybe yesterday, the final troops that were defending Mariupol and were still holding out, I think, surrendered to the Russians under certain international guarantees they would not be harmed. So hopefully there'll be a prisoner exchange and they'll make it back to Ukraine safely. In the meantime, Ukraine has sunk a couple of Russian ships, including its flagship in the Black Sea. It has thoroughly humiliated the Russian army, and the Russian army, I don't know when it will recover. It'll take it decades, if ever, to recover from the humiliation. But even more importantly than that, and again, this is something I called in a few days afterwards, Putin has lost because if you buy that part of his aim was to prevent Ukraine from becoming a NATO country, that part of his aim was to create a buffer zone between him and NATO, he has lost because now, officially, Sweden, as I predicted again, Sweden and Finland have both applied for NATO membership. Now, there's some small question about whether they'll become NATO members. We'll get to that in a minute. But, that is a huge, huge blow to Russia. That means NATO has basically doubled the border length that it has with Russia. It basically has now bolstered the defenses of Finland. Finland, which is another one of these countries that Russia has claim over, like Ukraine. Russia fought a war with Finland in 1939 to try to occupy it. It lost. Finland has voted yes. Sweden is voting yes. This will be huge. These two, claiming neutrality countries are now taking a clear anti-Russian stance and joining NATO. So Putin is completely lost. Completely lost. More than that, as I've said, part of the invasion of Ukraine was supposed to splinter Europe. It was supposed to divide. It was supposed to show that Europe cannot unite. And indeed, what it has done is, at least to some extent, not to the extent you would like, but to some extent, brought Europe together, brought a common front, sanctions. European sanctions would be pretty strict, and are not no way strict enough. Europe is still importing, $1 billion a day of oil from natural gas from Russia, but Europe has responded in ways that nobody imagined, and with unity nobody imagined. So on every front, literally on every front, the Ukrainians did not welcome the Russian tanks with flowers. The Ukrainian government didn't capitulate. We're not all convinced now that Ukraine is run by a bunch of Nazi Jews. Nazi Jews, there's a contrast. In every sense, Russia has lost this. I mean, it's shocking, but Putin has been shown to be a loser. And the real question is going to be now, will the American right recognize that and start distancing itself from Putin, or will they keep holding him up as a model? I got an email from a guy who I've known for a long time, who's always been a bit of a nut, and his argument is the problem with Putin is he's too soft. He's too influenced by liberal ideas. He should have crushed Ukraine, as if he had the capacity to do it. He should have crushed Ukraine, should have taken it over. He was playing too nice. He was being too gentle. Putin's in the right. Putin is right. Putin is just being too nice. He's being too much of a gentleman. He's just, after everything you've seen in this war, I mean, it takes certain special type of evasion, even for a Trump supporter, to go that low and that stupid and that evasive as to attribute the losses to Putin's. He could have done better, Putin's appeasement of liberalism. It'll be interesting how the American right responds now that a major role model has basically been defeated. One point I wanted, one more point about Europe that I want to make in this context. It turns out that while the Ukrainians were fighting and dying and repelling the Russian invasion with incredible courage and incredible determination and against all odds, while the president of Ukraine took the tough stand and fought it out and is now seemingly going for victory, it turned out that while this was happening, the leaders of France and Germany were groveling before the Kremlin to try to reach some kind of compromise, basically willing to sell out the Ukrainians in order to buy some love from Putin. Now, we'd expect this from the French. They almost never miss out on an opportunity to surrender, even when it's not theirs to surrender. And you've kind of expected from the Germans today, but it's still disgusting, horrific, and disappointing. It is, this West's weakness, which I think is part of the cause, one of the reasons so many people want to like Putin, is because they look at the West and what they see is pathetic children, weak, with no self-esteem, with no courage, with no willingness to fight for their own values, groveling before any dictator, whether it's dancing with the sheiks in Saudi Arabia and appeasing and doing whatever they want, including selling them gazillion dollars of arms, or whether it's groveling before Putin, be nice. We'll give you half of Ukraine, just be nice. European weakness, appeasement. You think you've learned appeasing evil never works, never benefits the good, always results in worse things happening. And here, by the way, Trump is as bad as the Germans and the French. Peace deal with the Taliban, groveling before the brutal dictator of North Korea, and chums with Putin. That's the model of the West today. The model of the West today is we don't know a dictator we don't love to grovel before. So, yeah, Germans and French living up to their status, living up to their reputation, living up to their backstabbing ways, living up to their pathetic weakness. I don't know. I mean, given what Ukraine's been through, I don't know how you forgive Macron and I forget the name of the guy who runs Germany these days, but it's just pathetic. Yeah, I mean, it's not enough that they're buying huge quantities of natural gas and oil and all the other stuff from Putin, but also to go to him and try to sell out. Sell out the Ukrainians. One other thing, I guess, with NATO, just a comment. It turns out that to be accepted to NATO, every member of NATO has to vote yes. It has to be unanimous. And Turkey has indicated that it would vote no on both Finland and Sweden. And the reason is that both Finland and Sweden have not exactly bought the Turkish line about the Kurds who want their own independent state in what is today Turkey and have engaged in terrorist activities within Turkey. The Swedish and Finns have not been as tough on the Kurds as Turkey would like. And Turkey's now telling them, forget it, we're not going to allow you to join NATO. Now, this is the problem with organizations like NATO. Why is Turkey even in it? It's an authoritarian regime. Why give Turkey veto power? I suspect, given that Turkey's economy is spiraling downwards very, very, very fast, I suspect that a bribe is on the table, that at some point the Americans or the Germans or somebody, or the Swedes and the Finns will say, look, here's X number of billions of euros, here's some debt relief, here's loan forgiveness, I don't know, something like that, and Erdogan will change his mind. I think he's put himself in a great bargaining position, but I think they will step back, particularly once they can be helped out economically. Erdogan, I don't know, you guys should be complaining about inflation in the United States, which is at 8-point-something%. In Turkey right now, official price inflation, consumer price inflation is 70%. That's 70%. The Turkish economy is a disaster right now, and they need all the help they can get. So I won't be surprised if, in exchange for some financial help, your good taxpayer money there going to bolstering up another one of those wonderful regimes that protects the principles of the American Declaration of Independence. I'm kidding. Going to another one of these authoritarians to bolster him, all because we've given an authoritarian veto power over a defense organization that we supposedly fund and subsidize and run. Yet we have no extra vote on. America's altruistic kind of lack of self-esteem when it comes to NATO is ours. We fund it. It's our troops. It's our weapons. We get to make the decisions. We don't care. And if we don't make the decisions, we shouldn't be there. which I don't think we should be. I don't think the U.S. should be a member of NATO. I think NATO should be a European defense organization without the United States. We've talked about this before. All right, that was just my quick update. I do think the Ukrainians have a chance. Anonymous user, thank you for the support. I do think the Ukrainians have a chance of actually defeating the Russians, actually pushing the Russians back to the pre-invasion borders. I think it'll take a while, but I do think they have that capacity, particularly given the heavy artillery and heavy weapons they're getting from the West right now. Those howitzer guns are much more powerful, much more accurate than anything the Russians have. So it's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting as the Ukrainians chip away at the Russian so-called gains. It'll be interesting to see how Russia responds. There's also constantly kind of floating rumors about a coup imminent coup in Moscow. So keep out an eye for that. Who knows if that'll happen. When I was in London, a number of the London city papers were running stories about the generals and the former KGB guys getting rid of Putin. You know that I think I read somewhere 7 oligarchs have now mysteriously died since the war began. 7. You think Putin is killing off people who might oppose him? No. He's one of the good guys. He would never do anything like that. He's admired by... I mean, this is the strategic genius. This is the man that Trump and everybody else on the right called a brilliant strategist. Well, everything he did strategically imploded in his face. I don't know that Russia will collapse, but Russia's in deep, deep economic trouble and deep, deep, deep military trouble. They have a problem of replenishing their troops. They might have to have a draft. A lot of problems. I don't see Putin in The Hague. A lot of problems. But I do see the Ukrainian army pushing the Russians back towards their own border, if not all the way to that border. All right. Let's see. Really big shift here. But we're going to shift from American and European kind of weakness to another American weakness. I don't know how many of you are following this story. Probably none of you, really, because I don't know how many of you are parents to infants right now, but this is a big story in the United States right now. Over the last few months, there is a substantial, significant shortage in baby formula. And this is not a minor issue. This is a major issue. I mean, women who do not breastfeed rely on baby formula to feed their babies. I mean, this is how we feed babies. Baby formula is, crucial. And there has been and is right now a significant shortage all over the United States in baby formula. There is, it's more so in some parts of the country than other parts of the country. But in places like Texas, it is a severe shortage. Some grocery stores, supermarkets, empty. Now, this was ostensibly triggered by the closing of a Michigan facility that produced about 50% of Abbott's formula product. And, but it can't just be that. Because even before the closure of this plant, there were already shortages. And of course, when you have shortages, prices go up. Prices going up in baby formula quite faster than price inflation across other products. So what's going on? Because in a free market, even if a plant closes, you don't actually get shortages. What happens is prices go up, people ramp up production, they fill the gap, as they ramp up production and they fill with more supply, prices start dropping. But here, while the plant in Michigan was closed, nobody stepped in to fill the supply problem. And the question, of course, is why? Why are there still shortages? Indeed, many retailers are rationing their baby formula. Now, some of this can be explained like everything these days. Every economic problem that we have, the Biden administration and the Democratic, economists say, well, it's COVID. It's the pandemic. The pandemic caused it. Supply chain issues, right? But is it really? Right? Fact is that there's no shortage in baby formula in Canada. There's no shortage in baby formula in the European Union. As far as we know, there's no shortage in baby formula anywhere in the world except for the United States. If this was a supply chain issue, if this was an issue that was resulted from the pandemic, then they would have been universal. They wouldn't have been localized to particular geography, to particular countries like the United States. So again, what is going on? Now, part of it is, again, going back to COVID. During COVID, some parents stockpiled. And manufacturers saw this as increased demand. They produced more, and then the baby formula just sat on the shelf. So they interpreted that as in other words, the demand-supply signals were distorted because of stockpiling that was caused not by any economic issue, but because of fear that resulted from COVID. And yeah, I mean, that is possible that these mothers panicked. They bought a bunch of them. The manufacturers saw that there was no increased demand. They slowed down production. And there's some mismatches going on. And that might be global. But you'd expect that to pretty much quickly realign itself. One would hope. Robert, thank you for the tip. Thanks for being here. So I don't think it's just that. It can't just be the pandemic. So what is it? Well, here I have to give full credit to, my now, one of the economists I land up following the most these days. I've talked about him before. Scott Lincicome, who runs a Substack by the name of Capitalisto, something like that, for the Dispatch, and he writes excellent stuff and he does excellent work. He's more of somebody who summarizes, does research, summarizes the basic knowledge about a particular field, and takes on issues like baby formula and digs in and to figure out what is actually going on. He's very good. Alejandro asked if he's an anarchist. I don't think he's an anarchist. I highly recommend his work. So I get a lot of info, and the stuff on the baby formula, basically, I've been following it through Scott on Twitter. Scott has an excellent Twitter feed, so you can go on Twitter and follow him. Definitely do that. Not John Cochran this time, although I'm a big fan of John Cochran's. This is Scott is Scott is a policy kind of economic policy kind of guy. He really digs into it gets into the details and into the trenches. So if it's not the pandemic, what's going on? Well, we know that when these kind of distortions, this weird phenomena, this places where suddenly supply and demand don't match up, where the market seems to fail, where markets are not working, where they don't behave like free markets, maybe it's because they're not free. So let's look at some of the ways the baby formula market is not free. Now, I'm using this not because this is unique. I want to spend a little time on this and dig into this, not because I think most of you particularly care about baby formula, but because I want to show you the distortive effects of government intervention all across the economy. Just imagine if this is happening with baby formula, what is going on with 1,000 other products, with 1,000 other products that are sold, that are used, that are imported, exported, regulated in the United States. So if we can take one baby formula and see how devastating regulations and tariffs and taxes and controls are, hopefully we can extrapolate that to more than just baby formula. Hopefully we can learn from this one example on how bad it is. I have interviewed Scott, I'm just going to call him Scott. Forget his last name, Scott. You can find the interview on my Ingenuism, on the Ingenuism podcast. So the Ingenuism podcast, I interviewed Scott on trade, on free trade. All right, so let's look at some of the things that are maybe not so free market around baby formula. For example, one of the things that you would expect to happen if you close a plant in Michigan that reduces the supply by this one manufacturer, Abbott, the largest supplier of baby formula in the United States, by half because the plant is shut down. What you'd expect is that people would start looking around the world for surplus capacity in the production of baby formula. Let's say Europe, a very advanced baby formula market with a lot of companies that produce baby formula, and you would buy more from Europe, and you would say, please send us more baby formula to the United States. We could really use it. Send it over here. And that's how the supply and demand get balanced out. The supply increases. The problem with that is there are multiple problems with that. One is in the United States, we have really high tariffs on baby formula. On baby formula, we have really high tariffs, 17.5%. Now, it's a complicated system. It's 17.5% up to a certain quantity, and it can get higher and it can get a little lower, but you can use 17.5%. So basically, you're paying 17.5% more for baby formula than they are in Europe for exactly the same thing. Because basically, American consumers are being taxed. It's not hurting the Europeans, it's hurting American consumers because of this tariff, 17.5%, which means that when production is eliminated in the US, we can't just turn to Europe and bring it in because the price is going to be dramatically higher. 17.5% is almost 20% higher. I mean, I want to emphasize this to all of you who in the Trump era thought that tariffs were cool. We could penalize the Chinese. No, you're penalizing your own people. You're penalizing people who feed babies. Now, add to that a lot of people said we need to bring production home. We need to bring the production to the United States. Well, okay, baby formula production, for a variety of reasons we'll get to in a minute, is mostly done in the United States. But now what happens when there's a problem with production in the United States? When one of your plants gets shut down. They were shut down by the FDA because they discovered a deadly bacteria in the plant, not in the food, on the formula in the plant. Then what do you do then? The whole beauty of a global supply chain, The whole beauty of having multiple sources of places where you can source material. The whole point of having a diversified sources is that whether production overseas, something happens, a tornado, a earthquake, a tsunami, or whatever, or whether it happens domestically, there's always access to other markets. The whole beauty of globalization, the whole beauty of free trade is you're not just going to get one place concentrating. You're going to get multiple sources. So, for example, we could have gone to Europe and brought in, and indeed, we could have gone to Canada and brought in baby formula. I'll tell you why we can't go to Canada in a minute. But let's focus still on Europe. We've got the tariffs, one. But second, the FDA doesn't permit European companies to sell baby formula in the United States. Now, why, you might ask? Isn't baby formula sold in Europe pretty safe? Troy, wow, thank you. Really, really appreciate that. Thank you, Troy, for the 500 Australian dollars, jumping in here with support. That's great. Why is it that we fear European baby food? Indeed, by many measures, European baby food, not baby food, baby formula, is safer than American baby formula. The regulations in Europe are stricter. Indeed, many parents who are into healthy baby formula try to buy baby formula in Europe and bring it into the US, even when there's no shortage. Now, they have to be careful because the customs will usually seize that baby formula and not allow it into the United States. Why? Because it hasn't met the arbitrary desires of the FDA. The Europeans don't label their baby formula and their food generally the same way as the FDA labels it in the United States. They don't provide you with the same kind of nutritional information that they're supposed to if they're going to sell in the United States. And on top of that, in order to sell baby formula in the United States, you have to register with the FDA, and you have to fill out the forms, and you have to spend all the money and the bureaucracy in order to become established as a baby formula producer and seller. So not only do we have high tariffs, but we also have major non-tariff, non-financial, non-tax restrictions on the ability of countries like Europe to sell baby formula in the US. And then on top of that, we have restrictions in Canada. Now here you can blame the Trump administration's trade negotiators. As part of the renegotiating of NAFTA, you remember? They renegotiated NAFTA because Trump was a free trader. All of you guys told me. Everybody said, no, you don't get it. Trump is really just twisting the arms. He's really just using tariffs to get more free trade. He really believes in free trade. Well, he had an opportunity. He could have pushed NAFTA to be a true free trade agreement. He could have, God forbid, just lowered tariffs to zero on baby formula, on everything else. But here's an example. The NAFTA 2.0, negotiated by the Trump administration with Canada and Mexico, actually has provisions in it to explicitly discourage Canadian suppliers from producing baby formula. Why, you say? Why would they do that? Well, to protect the American baby formula producers, but more importantly, to protect one of the most powerful lobbies in Washington, D.C. And that lobby is the milk lobby. You didn't know there was a dairy lobby, dairy products lobby in Washington, D.C. Huge, powerful, lots of money. It's Wisconsin and Minnesota and Michigan and all the states where dairy is a big deal. They don't want Canada to use its dairy for the production of baby formula. Imagine if NAFTA 2.0 had declared baby formula to be zero tariffs with Canada. Canada would have invested heavily because it's got a lot of milk, milk products, dairy products. They would have invested heavily in increasing production of baby formula, lowered the prices, and maybe made it less profitable for the dairy industry in the United States to run its little scam. God, there's so many layers to this. Everywhere you look, there's a special interest group pushing for something, and it all around some innocuous product like baby formula. Who cares? So Canada, which was about to make, a Chinese company was about to make a large investment in Canada in increasing the production of baby formula, didn't, because they couldn't then export it to the United States because the Trump administration wanted to protect dairy farmers in the upper Midwest, and as a consequence, played dramatic restrictions on Canada, the quantity of baby formula that Canada could export to the United States. And it goes on and on and on and on in terms of the complexity and the ridiculousness of the whole thing. It's absurd. But there's one more layer I want to get into, and then we'll move on. I mean, remember that dairy farmers also have price and income supports. The government often buys their excess milk. There's a million ways in which the government is subsidizing and controlling milk production and milk distribution and milk prices and everything that comes out of milk, from baby formula on the one hand all the way to cheese and everything else on the other hand. Milk in the United States is one of the most heavily controlled, regulated, subsidized products. Ooh, but Yaron, it's a national security issue. Really? Really? So, we will see. So, that's a situation, but I want to add to this one more thing, and that is the Special Supplemental Nutrition Program for Women, Infants, and Children, called WIC. It's one of the 1,000 different welfare programs that the United States provides poor people. And in this particular program, low-income Americans at or below 185% of the poverty line, that's almost double the poverty line, they get basically to buy formula at approved retailers at dramatically reduced costs. Now, what happens is that to buy this formula, to make it possible to sell it at dramatically reduced costs to these poor people, the USDA, which administers the program, it's the Department of Agriculture, basically has these large contracts with baby formula manufacturers. And they basically drive down prices dramatically. So they buy it from the formula manufacturers and then make it available for people to distribute. Right? And it turns out that half the formula sales in the United States are done through the WIC, through the Special Supplemental Nutrition Program for Women, Infants, and Children. Half. Now, when they negotiate prices with the infant formula manufacturers, they negotiate really, really, really low prices. They have incredible market power. They're buying half. On average, they get 92% below wholesale prices. In other words, the formula manufacturers are losing money on what they sell to the government. But they want to sell to the government because they get shelf space, they get visibility, they get the credibility of selling to the government, and then they try to, they ramp up prices on the other side to try to make up for it, right? And of course, they don't face foreign competition, so they don't have to worry about that. So they can afford to lose money to the government as long as they can make money off of regular consumers. Now, this has an unbelievable destructive and distortive effect on the market. Again, it's no free market. The government is a massive purchaser. Now, you can extrapolate the consequence of this to what would happen, or what is happening, when the government is a massive purchaser, for example, medical drugs from Big Pharma. The same kind of distorted practices happen. The same kind of malinvestment, lack of proper investment happens. Half the market for baby formula is controlled by a single buyer that demands unprofitable prices and compliance with piles of state and federal regulations. That's how you get a concentrated market. Who else is going to be able to do this? Nobody else can sell to the government except 3 big companies. And they have to be massive and huge so that they can make money elsewhere, so they can subsidize this sale to the government. Gene, thank you. So they get a massive subsidy that is captured by these big manufacturers of baby formula, and then there's no competition inside the United States. And again, we've talked about there's no competition international. Price signals are completely distorted. In a free market, when you have shortages, prices should go up. And again, encourage production. But here, most of the production is sold at 92% discount. So prices are not significant enough to cause increases in production. They're getting the same price from the government. These are long-term contracts. So, again, you can see how this would affect drug prices. You could see how this would affect the medical industry. It's just unbelievable that this is America. That people are under the delusion that this is somehow capitalism. Under the delusion that somehow we live in a free society. The baby formula crisis that we have today is not caused, as Elizabeth Warren and Joe Biden would like us to believe, by greedy corporations. It's caused by bad U.S. policy by Republicans and Democrats. Bad U.S. policy in terms of tariffs, bad U.S. policy in terms of FDA restrictions, bad U.S. policy in terms of structuring a welfare program that distorts markets and therefore hurts everybody. If you want to do welfare, there are far more efficient ways of doing it. One of the advantages Scandinavia has over the United States is that they're more efficient at distributing welfare. They don't distort the market as much as American the welfare system, which is unbelievably destructive. So U.S. policy makes any kind of shock to the system worse. Trade barriers make everything more expensive, restrict consumer options. And again, we're not talking about, baby formula from China and who knows what they're putting into it. We're talking about German and manufacturers in the Netherlands who, again, are being regulated by their own state. So imagine a world in which the President of the United States facing a crisis in baby formula, and again, it's really a crisis. If you're a parent, you know how crucial this is. would say, okay, I'm going to get a bill through Congress that does a few things. One, it eliminates tariffs on baby formula. It eliminates them, zeroes them out. Two, it requires the FDA to allow into the United States any baby formula that has been approved by an equivalent regulatory agency outside of the FDA, outside of the United States. So I'm not going all out laissez-faire capitalism here, right? Not ready for that yet, the world. But just common sense, just simple stuff. If the Germans have approved it, it's probably okay for Americans too. Three, we're going to do away with this subsidy for poor mothers. We're going to give them instead a voucher and make them consumers. We're going to give them a voucher for a particular amount of money, so we'll continue to subsidize. But we, the government, won't be buying the formula. We'll let consumers buy the formula. We'll just subsidize their purchase. We'll give them a voucher to buy formula. And thus, increase the market, not shrink it. What if you just passed a simple bill like that? We're going to zero out tariffs on baby formula. We're going to change FDA regulations to allow the importation of baby formula if it's been approved by an equivalent agency overseas. By the way, you can do the same thing with drugs. Why do we need Europeans to approve it, and the Israelis to approve it, and the Australians to approve it, and then the Americans maybe will approve it too? Why can't there be some reciprocity under the assumption that all those agencies use basically the same methodology and are very, very similar to one another? Given that we already have those agencies, I'd like to do away with all of them. How about somebody in the political spectrum offering actually a market solution to these problems? Now, what does the Biden administration want to do? They want to do the same thing that the nationalists want to do. They want to do the same thing that the Trumpists want to do. Oh, let's use the Emergency Production Powers Act, or whatever it's called, to force domestic producers to make more. Let's bring the supply chains back home. No, that's exactly why we have the disaster we have. We need a diversity of sources. We need to be able to produce goods all over the world. We're the politicians with balls. Right? Yes, there's special interest groups that are going to protect all this, pressure groups. But you know what? The Carter administration did away, Jimmy Carter's administration, did away with price controls on airline tickets. Believe me, there were pressure groups protecting that one. They did away with trucking regulations. They did away with regulating brokerage fees, and as a result, brokerage fees have plummeted. I'm sure the brokers didn't like that. Jimmy Carter and, to some extent, Ronald Reagan administration were brave in standing up to pressure groups. Australia and New Zealand, for example, major dairy-producing nations with major dairy lobbies, have eliminated barriers to import formula and all, I don't know if all, and other dairy products. Because they realize that it makes economic sense and it makes moral sense. It's just stupid policy in every respect. What we need is freedom. And we need somebody, it would be nice if in the land of the free and the brave, some political leader stood up for freedom, for markets, for letting the market work. And not for these unbelievable distortions. But there's nobody in the political system. I mean, wouldn't it be nice if we actually had somebody who was interested, willing, capable of draining the swamp? Really draining the swamp. Not replacing the swamp animals, not exchanging them, but actually draining the swamp. But that would mean doing the hard work of convincing the American people it was the right thing to do, of rallying Congress around a set of laws, not just changes to regulations, that eliminated the controls, the regulations, the tariffs, the taxes, the constraints on production and constraints on the producers. Is there a political leader out there willing to do that, interested in doing that, capable of doing that? I don't see him. You know, hopefully I'm wrong. Hopefully one will arise before the next election. But I guess we will see. All right. Which brings us to, I'm all for draining the swamp. I'm not for changing the swamp animals from Hillary Clinton swamp animals to Trump swamp animals. I'm not sure one are better behaved than the other. So this brings me to a tweet by Jeff Bezos. Now, I know most people think Jeff Bezos is some kind of leftist, but I don't think Jeff is. I think he's probably more of a kind of a libertarian who doesn't have a political home and who probably voted Democratic because he hated Trump, but probably he's not a Democrat and doesn't regularly vote Democratic. Here's Jeff Bezos' tweet. This is in response to Joe Biden's tweet. So Joe Biden wrote this. You want to bring down inflation? Let's make sure the wealthiest corporations pay their fair taxes. Again, Joe Biden wrote, you want to bring down inflation? Let's make sure the wealthiest corporations pay their fair share of taxes. How would that bring down inflation? Where's the economic theory that suggests that corporate taxes are related to inflation? There's no relationship between the two. But that is a United States government official tweet coming out of Joe Biden. Jeff Bezos responds. The newly created Disinformation Board should review this tweet. Or maybe they need to form a new non sequitur board instead. Whoops, sorry. My Jeff Bezos tweet jumped. Raising corporate taxes is fine to discuss. Taming inflation is critical to discuss. Mushing them together is just misdirection. I'll read you Jeff Bezos' tweet again. The newly created Misinformation Board should review this tweet. Or maybe they need to form a new non sequitur board instead. Raising corporate taxes is fine to discuss. Taming inflation is critical to discuss. Mushing them together is just misdirection. Other people comment on deficits and other things, and Jeff Bezos later writes, in fact, the administration tried hard to inject even more stimulus into an already overheated inflationary economy. And only Manchin, the senator from West Virginia, saved them from themselves. Inflation is a regressive tax that most hurts the least affluent. Misdirection doesn't help the country. This is exactly what the Democrats are doing. There's an inflation problem. We know what caused it. Primarily, the Federal Reserve monetizing the massive government spending that went into COVID relief. And spending $3.5 trillion, creating massive deficits. And the Federal Reserve monetizing that caused inflation. Democrats, inflation is caused by corporate greed, which didn't exist, I guess, when there was no inflation. Inflation is caused by corporations paying too few taxes. Inflation is caused by anything except the thing that we really advocate for, which is lots of government spending. Now, I don't think anybody's buying the misdirection from the Democrats, but it is interesting to watch. Right. This is the White House's response to Jeff Bezos. Quote, "It doesn't require a huge leap to figure out why one of the wealthiest individuals on earth opposes an economic agenda for the middle class that cuts some of the biggest costs families face, fights inflation for the long haul, and adds to the historic deficit reduction the president is achieving by asking the richest taxpayers and corporations to pay their fair share. It's also unsurprising that this tweet comes after the president met with labor organizers, including Amazon employees." So again, yeah, I mean, everything Biden is doing is going to reduce inflation, it's going to reduce the deficit, including spending additional $3.5 trillion. Jeff responds, "Look, a squirrel. This is the White House's statement about my recent tweets. They understandably want to muddy the topic. They know inflation hurts the neediest the most. But unions aren't causing inflation, and neither are wealthy people. Remember, the administration tried their best to add another $3.5 trillion to federal spending. They failed. But if they had succeeded, inflation would be even higher than it is today, and inflation today is at a 40-year high." Jeff Bezos is not some nutty leftist. He might own the Washington Post, but does he have editorial say in the Washington Post? Is he hands-off owner? We don't know. Everything I know about Jeff Bezos suggests that he is a small L libertarian. There's a free marketer at the core. He's not a socialist. He's not a redistributionist. He's not a, big government type at all. Indeed, I think many people in Silicon Valley who are accused of being leftists are like this. They probably support much of the social agenda of the left, but on economic policies, they're free market people. So what can I say? I always am happy to see a businessman standing up for himself, talking back to politicians, defending himself and defending his ideas. Yeah, none of these people are perfect. I get it. None of these people are perfect. But the reason he lobbied for a $15 minimum wage, do you know why he lobbied for $15 minimum wage? Because he felt like he was forced to provide it to his employees under threat of government action by the Trump administration of all people. And he said, look, if I'm going to have to pay $15 minimum wage, then everybody should. Now, I'm not justifying, I'm not saying he's justified in doing it. But if you ask Jeff Bezos, do you believe there should be a minimum wage? And if we got rid of minimum wage across the board from Amazon and everybody else, would you be happier? I bet you he would say yes. Bet you he would say yes. Oh, is he somewhat of an environmentalist? I'm sure. Is he somewhat of a compromise on other things? I'm sure. Is he perfect? No. But God, he's one of the most successful businessmen in human history. He's improved your life and my life dramatically. And he has a voice that once in a while he uses to stand up to government. I'm all with him. I'll take a businessman like Bezos over any politician, particularly businessmen turned politicians, some of whom you know. The Democratic Party, when it comes to inflation, is aggressively trying to divert attention away from what causes inflation. Government spending out of control and a Fed that bails out everybody left and right. Linda, thank you for the support. Really appreciate it. Who else did I miss here? Anonymous user, thank you. So, they're afraid. Inflation is going to really, really hurt them. Yeah, in recent times, Elon Musk has stood up to government more than Jeff Bezos has, no question. Still good to see Jeff Bezos do it. I wish more did it. There's no accident, by the way, that he's only standing up to government now that he's left Amazon, right? He's left a CEO. He wouldn't be doing this if he was CEO of Amazon. All right. Let us see. We're doing pretty well on the Super Chat, although given that Troy came in with like 500 Australian, I don't know, shouldn't we going for like $1,000, Catherine, or $800 at least? We're close to 700, but there's at least another $100 there, given that Troy kind of made it such an easy day for everybody else. So again, thank you, Troy, for stepping in like that. What we need is a real defense of capitalism and free markets. What we need is a real defense of markets. I'm glad to see Scott Lincecum provide that kind of defense on certain issues, all the issues he deals with, primarily trade issues. I'm glad to see people standing up against tariffs, all tariffs, Republican tariffs, Democratic tariffs, all tariffs. I'm glad to see people standing up to idiots like at the White House who don't understand where inflation comes from, or do understand where inflation comes from, but try to deflect, and try to misdirect, and try to misinform. All right, let's do some questions. We'll start with the $20 questions. Harper asks, this whole changing the culture thing is a lot harder than it should be if people are honest and could use logic. Absolutely, people are not honest and can't use logic. And you can see that across the board, and you can see the tragic effects that it has. And here you're seeing, you're seeing across the board, left and right, people can't think. Can't think, and people don't support freedom. There's no support for freedom. Colt says, by the way, nothing again. Oh, there must be some context. Maybe you can disabuse me of this, but didn't Jeff lobby the government to raise the minimum wage? Oh, I just responded to that already. And then he says, by the way, nothing against Jeff. I would say my life has improved and much better because I buy products from lower prices on Amazon. Absolutely. Jeff is one of the great businessmen of ever, all time, and one of the people who've changed the world more than any others. And I owe him a great debt of gratitude for how he's improved my life, and I think all of you do too. And the fact that he's not perfect, the fact that he's done things that I don't agree with, that I don't support, doesn't change that. Who has? Let's see. Jeffrey says, for a bottle of water, if you make it to a Celtics game, $20 for a bottle of water. That how much a bottle of water costs? I guess so. I'll buy you an Al Horford jersey if they make it to the finals. I think they're going to make it to the finals, and let me just take a peek here. All right. Ooh, they were leading early, and now Miami's overtaken them. So 23-21, Miami's leading in the first quarter. They must have gone cold because they were leading by quite a bit early on. So we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens, how the game plays out. Ooh, it looks like Marcus Smart didn't start today. He's not playing today. Must be injured. All right, let's hope he gets back. Let's see. Let's see. Thank you, Jeffrey. Oh, and I owe you, Jeffrey, a restaurant review. So I'm going to write it down. I owe Shazbot the movies, and I owe you the restaurant review from Barcelona. So I will do that on Friday. Restaurant review. I did make it to Disparatu, Disfrato, something like that. that famous restaurant in Barcelona, we actually made it. We were on the waiting list, and they called the day before, and we got in, which was amazing. Hopper asked, will the West have to invade and restructure Russia like it did in Germany? Enlightenment ideas can't seem to penetrate Russian culture organically, even though the Russian people have tasted a little freedom after 1990. I don't know what it's going to take. I don't think invading is in the cards because of Russia's nuclear capabilities. I'm not sure restructuring Russia will do it. I'm not sure the West today can do it. I'm not sure the West today has enough of those Enlightenment values that it can project them, that it can, in a sense, convince, inspire another country to adopt them. So I'm just not convinced of that the West is in a position to enlighten others, given how weak it is. All right, a bunch of $5 and $10 questions. If you want to ask a question, please do. We're at $700, but that's a pretty favorable exchange rate, which I'm pretty sure YouTube does not give me. YouTube gives me lousy exchange rates. So I'm not sure how much Troy's 500 Australian actually translates into American dollars. So we're probably at less than 700. Another 100 would be good. Tazy, thank you. Appreciate the support. Michael asks, you actually think in only 50 years we're going to change the entire state of the culture? Given how bad things are today, I find that hard to believe, unless he thinks 50 years is a long time. 50 years is a long time. I've lived 50 years. I can project back 50 years. It's a long time. A lot of things can change in 50 years. Soviet Union, 50 years ago, Soviet Union was a major force in the world. It is not anymore. Can we change the culture in 50 years? Yes. Will we? I don't know. I don't know. All right, so yes, we're not at $700. We're actually only at $550. So we have about $50 still to make it just to the 600 mark. So we're way behind. You guys are slow today. You guys are slow. All right, $50, guys. Somebody come in with $50. Michael asked, does Israel have free speech laws, or can you be arrested for hate speech? Israel does have hate speech laws, just like most European countries. It doesn't have a constitution that protects your First Amendment right. And no country without a constitution, all countries without that constitutional protection have hate speech laws. I truly believe that the United States would have hate speech laws if not for the First Amendment. Nobody's going to kill you, Catherine. We all make mistakes. I was overly optimistic for a few seconds there, but it's okay. People are going to step in, and we are going to be back at 600 in no time. Right, guys? Somebody's going to make Catherine's day. Michael asked, the Democratic Party came to the realization that there are only two ways to enslave people: work them without pay or pay them without work. That's clever, all right? That's clever. So now they pay them without work. Again, not the same as slavery. Slavery is different. $42 is to make our goal of $600. $42. Probably $60, $70 really if the exchange rate is not as favorable. $100 would be safe. So 5 questions at $20 each. What did Ayn Rand mean when she said it was the greatest sensation of existence not to trust but to know? Well, it's to know something, and to know you know it. That is to have the experience of, I'm not just trusting an authority. I don't just believe this. I don't just have a vague notion of it. I know this. That's what it's all about, that knowing, that certainty, that epistemological certainty, that is what knowledge is about, and that's what she's saying. Having the capacity to know, experiencing that, is the greatest sensation one can have of existence, right? Of the world out there. He says, Liam says, another end quote I'm confused about is, There are no evil thoughts except one, the refusal to think. Aren't evil thoughts evil and issue to be judged morally? Yes. But what she's saying is that all evil thoughts have their origin with the refusal to think. All evil thoughts are just a consequence of the refusal to think. That is, if you're willing to think, if you engage in thought, if you're honest, independent, objective, then you will not have evil thoughts. So the origin, the source of it all is the refusal to think. Harper asks, was Plato threatened by human ability the way Kant was? I don't think so. I don't think so, but I don't know. It's a good question to ask, like a historian of philosophy like Greg Silmieri. Jeremy asks, what can be done about Turkey preventing Finland and Sweden from entering NATO? Can we kick Turkey out instead? We could, but we won't. We're too cowardly to do that. There are lots of reasons why we should consider kicking Turkey out of NATO. But I think what will actually happen is that, as I said, Turkey will be bribed into accepting Finland and Sweden. Landon asks, all right, we're running out of questions, so if you want to ask a question, now's the time. We're almost out. Landon says, like France, Trump also groveled before Putin. Yes, it was pretty disgusting. Anonymous user, I noticed engineering graduates being publicly shamed for pursuing employment in American defense industry. I think many engineers have good intentions and ambitions. What are your thoughts? Well, yeah, I mean, they're publicly shamed by a left that hates America, by a left that hates the idea of America defending itself, that America producing weapons to defend itself. I think it's unjust, the shaming. I think a lot of libertarians engage in the shaming as well. But I think it's wrong. I mean, there's no shame in working in a free country, or relatively free country, in the defense industry. J.J. Jigsby's asks, corporations have some responsibility, no? They're the ones egging on and taking part in the corruption at their own benefit, yes? Well, at their own benefit, at their own cost. Most of it's in their own cost. It's the sanction of the victim. They're responsible because they're providing this sanction. But I still think that they're fundamentally the victim here. That is, the force is being applied not by them, but the force, the actual force, is being applied by government. And much of what they do is an attempt to defend themselves from the force of the government. So, while corporations are to some extent to blame, I don't put majority of the blame on them. I feel sorry for them, and by the way, I think most of their efforts hurt them more than anything else. By the way, this Saturday, I'm doing a front row event, which is going to be a small group. I think it's 14 people. We're just going to talk about self-esteem. It's going to be very interactive. You can sign up. I think it's $100. You can go to Action Jackson has put in the chat here the link to where you can go to sign up and join us. It's going to be a lot of fun. So I hope you guys can join us. Richard asks, how can man's life be a standard if his life is miserable? Yeah. Miserable or not, there is no other standard. It's all there is life. And then the question is, why is he miserable? And what makes him miserable? And is the misery metaphysical, as Jordan Peterson would argue? Or is it man-made? So you start with life as a standard, and then the question is, what kind of life can you create? Look, there's no question. that you can't come up with an egoistic philosophy, and you can't come up with life as the standard and reason as the means of basic means of man's survival, and the ultimate virtue and value without a period of human success. So you've got to have a sense that life is not metaphysically miserable to be able to come up with a philosophy that says life is a standard and the purpose, your purpose is happiness. And of course, in the Enlightenment, they came up with the idea that the purpose of life is happiness, that that's what we should strive for. And they had it before Ayn Rand, and they had it before the Industrial Revolution. But life was good enough that they could see it, that they could identify that happiness was possible, that happiness was attainable in this world, in this life. Hitchens asked, do you agree with Michael Malice that some people can't be helped? They listen to ideas, but are either incapable or unwilling to think critically. Yes, completely. Some people cannot be helped. Maybe even most people cannot be helped. A significant number of people cannot be helped. It's not a small number. So yes, I agree. Colleen, thank you. Really appreciate the support. I think that brought us up to 600, so thanks a lot. All right, everybody. Thank you. I'm going to go watch the Celtics. Ahead, 36-30 in the second quarter. So I'm going to go watch the game. Hopefully they'll win. That'd be cool. Next show will be on Thursday at 8 p.m. So another Celtics game I'm going to miss part of, unfortunately. But that will be on Thursday. And then, of course, we'll have Alex Epstein on the show at 12 p.m. East Coast time on Saturday. Interview with Alex Epstein. Then we'll have the Front Row event, so don't miss that. And then there'll be a show on Sunday. Okay, Colt got a question in at the last minute. Follow up on yesterday. I go to a Protestant church, which is Methodist. Not like that makes a difference to you. The left controls a lot of the churches. It makes them more susceptible to environmentalism. Yes, I think that's right. But as I said, I think religion makes you susceptible to environmentalism. After all, didn't God put us here on earth to take care of nature, to take care of the animals? All right, Richard, I'm glad you enjoyed the show.